Just about John Cooper Clarke, he was talking in the Fall book I've just read about working class thing, about working class people getting involved in Dada and stuff. Is that true? You know, for the first time, it was like, you know, a thing that was, you know, all that eclectic stuff going on.
I think the working class, this is a big cultural question. The working class is involved with sort of peculiar high art.
Well, it's something I always associate, obviously, very much with Ian Curtis, because of the way that he suddenly, out of, I would imagine, an appalling education not unlike mine, would suddenly be reading, you know, Dostoevsky and Ballard and great science fiction and strange, unusual things. And there is the autodidact thing about the whole thing, without a doubt, that poorly educated bastards like me, suddenly, you know, I wanted to find out. I wanted, you know, it's that pretension thing in a way. I wasn't embarrassed about, you know, showing off a desire to read, you know, Kafka and Baudelaire and Rambo, and also somehow assign that to liking the new Wire album. It all seemed to be part of the same thing. And definitely the intense imagery of Ian, that, you know, he appropriated so much stuff through his own desire to learn and to find out things, and to send it out into the world in a new original state. And I think that was incredibly kind of incendiary, that combination of working class people feeling dulled and let down and patronised and sent, you know, for a shit life in the corridors of doom forever, suddenly finding a way that they could be liberated through art and through entertainment, and that was an incredible moment.
I wouldn't put it down too much to the punk era. I think that's grammar schools in British culture. Yeah. The grammar school idea was that you were a working class kid, but you were reading Shakespeare, and one of your sixth form teachers would tell you about Rambo or something like that. So I think there's that bit. I can remember there's a wonderful film of me interviewing John. This is in '76 for Granada, and we're in the tool room of Salford Tech, and because he's handing out tools, that's his job. And so he's handing out, the guys keep coming in for spanners and drills, and John and I are talking about Keats, and it's very, very strange.
And mixed with that, an incredible sense of humour that I think is often underestimated as well. I mean, I always think Factory Records possibly the funniest label ever. Sometimes intentional, sometimes not. But it was, but very, very funny as well. And I think sometimes that mixture of taking things very, very seriously, not taking them seriously at all, and really winding people up, that great radical mischief, is at the absolute essence of great popular culture.
Okay, Mike over here to the gentleman with the crap haircut. There's a wonderful cartoon in this week's New Yorker which says the guy's having a tattoo on his head, and it says,
"It must be crap, he's got toad on it." I couldn't fit
exactly. Exactly. Go on.
Vic Gilmore. I'm from Bolton, so I apologise for that, Saltis. I do apologise.
You weren't in them, though, were you?
But fucking hell, I was only 14 at the time.
Well, I think they were, actually.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you about two things. About the violence that we came across as punk rockers. Did you ever see any of that? And also, do you, Tony, realise how influential you was at that time? When I was only 14 and you was on What's On, and my mum and dad said, "He's a scruffy bleeder." I thought, that'll do for me.
Yes, I knew what I was doing. I knew how privileged we were to put those bands on for the first time. And the fact that people remember where they were when they saw that skinny kid with his guitar standing on a rostrum above me and Janet Sussman, or whatever, those moments are wonderful. And yes, I knew what we were doing.
It did fuck up an entire generation, though, Tony, because you know, you completely confused us. Because on one hand you were that prat, and on the other hand you were giving us, you know, Joy Division before there were even Joy Division. So it was deeply confusing, and many of us have not got over it.
That was the idea.
Which is why we tend to headbutt you and snog you all at the same time.
I quite agree. The confusion was valuable, but I think what was very strange for me with punk and my television career was, funny, you mentioned going to the Free Trade Hall. I can remember going to a Rory Gallagher Taste concert. And Gallagher was a good guitarist, and that was 75.
I love that face you had then, Tony.
And I remember the fact that my generation, who I thought would really appreciate me, you know, people who lived in Chorlton, exactly, fuck them, right? My generation would appreciate there was some kid from their generation, fresh out of university, on TV, putting Doors tracks on TV, putting Bruce Springsteen, putting all this music on TV for soundtracks, you know, a bit of Grateful Dead on this and that. And instead, they hated me. And I would go to parties in Chorlton for a while. I stopped going to parties in Chorlton. In fact, I still, to this day, do not go to parties in Chorlton. In fact, I try to avoid Chorlton with a passion. But I was despised and hated by my own generation of social workers and lawyers and school teachers. I can remember having this awful experience at this Taste concert in particular. Was the ultimate example of people despising me because on television he's a twat and all the rest of it. And then it was 2 years later, was it that Talking Heads Blondie gig, which was a wonderful Free Trade Hall early punk gig, and there was a new generation of kids there, and they were all really lovely to me. I thought, fuck me, I found my real life. And I hate my own generation, the tossers. You asked another part of the question. The violence. Well, the weird thing, I don't know about the violence, but what was weird was there was a very strange moment, and you mentioned the weird people who were around. There was one fat kid who was at all the early concerts. And then there was a very strange moment in this culture. You'll see from upstairs, I mean, I haven't had much time to look around the exhibition very carefully, but it was a shock culture. And one of the most wonderful images I've ever seen is Jamie Reed's poster of a swastika in marijuana leaves. It's just the most gorgeous sort of oxymoron, visual oxymoron. And this culture played with Nazi imagery. I mean, I was the one that was told by my boss, this is a fucking Jewish television company. Look at that bloody woman on TV there in the rehearsal room. And this was Jordan. And the miracle of gaffer tape, if you look at the Pistols on So It Goes, that's gaffer tape over Jordan's swastika armband. And you get swastika armbands on the Sid Vicious doll on the cover of the wonderful... I thought the Ronnie Biggs single was, again, a great single. But all that stuff... There was a very strange moment in late 76 when this culture veered and suddenly the Anti-Nazi League was founded. And suddenly it was like, right on, fantastic. And I can remember the very first Anti-Nazi League march, and suddenly there was that fat kid who'd been at all the early gigs, and he was standing there with a bunch of NF, and he's got NF sort of stuff on him. And it was like, oh my God. And he was British BNP. So there was a strange moment which the Anti-Nazi League completely diffused. And in fact, I always used to say, if I ever saw a single NF person at a Joy Division gig, Greta and I'd have a big fucking row and we'd discuss it the next day. But because everyone knows there's none of that, it's bollocks. And the strange thing is, to me, the last great punk band who were punk